Have you ever walked out of a high stakes meeting or an encounter in the home where you just feel that you wish that you had reacted differently? Maybe you felt your shoulders getting tense, you felt that you are overwhelmed, carrying a heavy burden. Maybe you lashed out, maybe you shut down, maybe you just felt stressed. What if I told you that you have access to an internal reset button in your leadership that is within you? Welcome to this episode of The Regulated Leader. In our last episode, we explored why creating an internal bandwidth, which is having the capacity to operate from a state of clarity, being centered and being present as a leader, is so important now more than ever, where we're facing ever-changing needs and demands, and we are often called upon to be at our highest and best regardless of the circumstances that surround us. So today we will get to dig deeper into how to truly create that internal bandwidth. When we look at how our bodies were designed, it is normal for us to constantly potentially be in a state of reactivity, of fight, freeze, or shut down, or flee, wanting to just be done and avoid the situation, because that is how our bodies were built. And in that lies the signal that we can use to help us to bridge the gap back to regulated nervous system. Because when our nervous system is in a state of freeze, fight, or flee, we're not able to be at our highest and best. Our energy gets depleted quickly. Any action and activity we take during this time, we use extreme effort as we try to push through the day, push through the meeting, push through the situation. But now, I would like us to explore the potential of having a reset button within those high-stake situations, within those high-stake moments. What we call internal bandwidth in such a scenario is the space between the stimuli, that is the trigger, that causes a nervous system reactivity, and our response. So we get a chance to have that space either broadened or get smaller. When that space between the stimuli and response is shortened, then we often will react, lash out, want to micromanage or control situations or environments or people around us. We could also find ourselves speaking so quickly, breathing short breaths, and creating an environment that is not in alignment with our values or our highest and best. Likewise, we could default to preset methods of dealing with stress, such as procrastination and shutdown, or complete emotional numbness. When these things happen, we often lose the trust and the vision with our team members or those that we're serving. When we are constantly reacting in such states, or when we're vacillating between one and the other. However, if we're able to identify when our bandwidth is running low, that means when we're being taken away or being pulled away because of reactivity, or going into shutdown mode, or going into freeze mode, where we can't just think or process. Once we're able to identify those moments, and then we can make a choice to take a pause and recalibrate. We can take a pause and think about how the situation and how we may want to respond based on our values. We could take a pause just to allow ourselves to get back into grounding and to really be able to feel again and be part of discussion that is not based on that reactivity or a hijacked nervous system state. We get to choose. That space, that button is where our power truly lies. More power than we can obtain by micromanaging and trying to control situations, because really we can't control all the situations. For example, we may have been busy at work in meetings and projects throughout the day, and at the end of the day, just when we're about to call it a day, receive a very heated email, and we get to choose. At that point, imagine you're in a state of being overwhelmed. You have had quite enough energy depletion in the day, and you do not have, this is not an urgent matter, it does not need a response on that day. A regulated leader will immediately notice that their bandwidth is running dangerously low, and rather than continue to follow up and engage in that email thread, a regulated leader will be able to be at a place where they can step away and walk away and respond when they're in higher energetic state on the next day. That same leader could potentially be going home, and soon as they walked in, interacting with their toddler could spill a drink. At times when maybe you're waiting to receive visitors, or you have other things that are so urgent in the activity of that evening, and rather than choose to immediately react, regulated leader who's able to have that power space could take a moment and breathe and consider what they truly value, and maybe realize the value of presence over perfection in that moment, and choose to lean into the toddler and have a connection with that toddler. The small acts of micro resets, or having that, utilizing the power within, that reset button within, goes a long way in terms of allowing us to be leaders with a legacy of connection, of trust, and maintaining a clear pathway towards that mission and vision and values that we uphold. As you're listening to this discussion, I'm curious for you. When does your bandwidth run low? When do you notice your bandwidth running low? What are your main triggers? And how do you normally respond? What's your default response when you get in those moments? We can commit to not making big decisions or having big discussions when our nervous system is in a state of fight, freeze, or flee. We can choose to actually use the power within to get our nervous system back into a regulated state, and then take action from there. It takes conscious effort and also an awareness as leaders, but what we do and how we react will then affect our energy levels. It affects how we're perceived by those around us. It also affects our action, so that by all means, our action will be more inspired and less reactive. For this week, as you go about your life in both home and in the workplace, I welcome you to notice your bandwidth levels and have some checkpoints as often as it's possible throughout your day to check where you are in your bandwidth capacity. And then also, when you feel that you've gotten into this nervous system state that is away from the space of clarity, then try to practice micro reset, such as breathing or any ways that you may have at your disposal to allow you to get grounded. Maybe a drink, maybe a quick walk, depending on the situation. Think of what you might do when you get in that situation, and then plan your action from that point. Thank you so much for listening to this session, and if this resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and follow along as we continue to build upon this week after week. My desire is to support high impact leaders so that your leadership journey doesn't have to be one of constant burnout, overwhelm, and a path that does not align with your values. I invite you to journey with me into clarity, balance, and connection for you, for your loved ones, and for those that you serve. Thank you and have a blessed week.